You know, right now I'm lucky enough to be in the beautiful state of California. Been here for quite a while. Got a little ways to go till I have to head back to beautiful Colorado. While I'm here, I want to talk about this state and dedicate an entire episode to the beautiful state of California because there's a lot of history with travel healthcare that kind of made its heyday here in California for a long time. A lot of uniqueness with this state, and a lot of travelers' destinations oftentimes point to California. So we want to talk about California on this week's edition of Travel Evolved. It's Travel Evolved. I'm Mark Holloway. Welcome to the episode, everyone. Thank you guys so much for boosting this podcast, this YouTube channel. Both of them, again, another big hiccup up last few weeks. So all I can say is I think we're doing things decently. You guys seem to be responding, and that's the whole idea behind something like this. Is if it's getting no response, that means it didn't work. That means there was no interest out there in what uniqueness we were offering with Travel Evolved. And clearly, that doesn't seem to be the case. We've got some really, really great dedicated listeners, and I'm incredibly grateful for each and every one of you. You guys are awesome. A lot of you text me, let me know, hey, I listen to your stuff all the time. Got a quick question or can I share my contract with you? And I love those things, and it's great. It tells me that, again, like I've said, not every episode makes sense to everybody. There are going to be people that say, I have no interest in California, but I want you to listen and watch this episode in case you never know what the future can hold. And like I've always said, there's always little nuggets that kind of come in to an episode, but we are very, very grateful. Like I say, I think we try to look at it a little bit and say, what is it that's causing big bumps in viewership and additional subscriptions? What is it that flattens that out? I mean, we try to think it has a lot to do with the episodes, but I also think it has a lot to do with how busy people are, the time of year, what people have going on their plate. And I do think how timely some of our episodes are for, the particular circumstances going on. And it's been, like we've said many times on Travel Evolved, it's been a really wild couple of years, and we're not done. We're not done with the wildness. I can just tell you, you don't have to read too much into much of anything to know that the wildness is still going to be here. And I'm just talking about how volatile the travel healthcare market is right now. Just things all over the place. I had an opportunity to talk to a couple of different CEOs yesterday, actually it was, and it was really unique. We were just three-waying on a conference call, talking about the state of the market, and these are two people I really do respect in the industry. We're all keeping things pretty guarded. I mean, we all know what each other's doing, but no one's going to come out and really tell each other what we're doing and what's going on. But we all did commiserate that right now things are just different. It isn't. How do I explain it? It's not more difficult to place people, but it's a uniqueness. Here's what I think is really happening. When I was talking to them yesterday, I made the comment. I said, I think a lot of us and a lot of agencies, because why wouldn't they, have been attracted by new travelers, which means a lot of them were like, hey, man, I'm new, I've never done this, and you guys are paying a lot of money. And everyone was infiltrated, if you will, with a lot of new travelers. And I think now that the rates don't seem to be shooting back up, and like I said many times here, I said they were going to drop, and I said they're not going to drop that much. And I don't know, you have to define what that much means to you. But I said very poignantly and very clearly many times I never thought they were going to go back to early 2019 rates, because I said it's a different world there now, and we lost a whole bunch of healthcare professionals. And I think higher ups at facilities and hospitals have said, we really need to make sure we don't ever get in a situation where we're diverting patients away. And that happened to a lot of them when they couldn't staff what they needed to. So it was a really wild conversation. What we basically all did is agreed that we're all doing the best we can to get things done, but there's huge competitions. For every single job that you're going in front of, there is somebody who looks on paper exactly like you. That's why we do things on resumes, we do things on interview and how to prepare for interviews and what questions to ask and all the things that are important in gaining and securing the job. And if we haven't done those episodes, they're on the list. So I always get confused. I look and see what we've done. It's amazing. I'm getting so old now. I can't remember. What episodes were in the teens. Did we cover that one? Because I look at the episodes and see what's coming up. Typically, I look forward down the list. But sometimes I think we've done an episode and it turns out it's one I looked at that's maybe 2 or 3, 4 episodes down the way, and I'm just in my mind I thought we've done it. So apologize for my age and my senior moment, I guess, or my senior moments I'm having. But I do that a lot. I think we've done an episode and it's actually one that's coming up. So anyway, getting back to California, this is from experience I can tell you, and we've been talking a lot on Travel Evolved about kind of my history, and I apologize for boring a lot of you because it really is hard to sit there and say, here's what I did next. But I do think it's important for many of you that don't know much about me to say, well, what has this guy done? How does he feel like he can talk intelligently to travelers? And I think most CEOs would say that we do, but I think there's a lot of us out there that maybe don't talk as well to travelers. But I wanted you guys to understand my hands-on history of this industry and how long it's been, which is, I think, unique. Like I said a couple of years ago, and I'll get into this definitely over the next few months, I'm in a unique position, have been. There's not that many people that have been doing this as long as I have, and I think that's both positive and negative. It can actually hurt me because things need to be done a different way. But anyway, California is an episode that I said we've got to talk about, we have to do, and I've done some things on California before, but I really wanted to wrap it up into one episode. So let's just start off by saying California has always been its own separate monster. A couple of companies ago that I ran, it was by far the biggest destination. I mean, overwhelmingly, I want to say like 40% of every traveler I had with that company, the destination was California. And I track, you guys may probably know this, I track everything. I'm like a numbers geek. I literally look at every statistic possible from every marketing standpoint to see what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. So I did track what specialty, how long were the assignment, what states they all went to, and that was overwhelmingly a state that was a huge destination. I'm talking about in the early and mid 2000s. This industry, in my opinion, really went through a big, huge and positive change towards more participation when California became a really hot destination. I'm talking like 2003, 2004, even 2001, 2002. Things were like, wow, you can make a lot of money out in California for some reasons that we're going to talk about here today. Not to mention that the state has some gorgeous areas. Some of the prettiest areas in our entire country are in the state of California. That's why people are willing to face the cost of living to live out here, because for many of them it's worth it. They'd rather live at a lower quality to be able to enjoy, the outdoor activities, the views, the air, the lack of, in my opinion, the lack of allergies and things that you see elsewhere. I mean, just everything feels better here. I'm not trying to plug California because I don't want anybody else to move out here. Matter of fact, I like that people are leaving this state because it's maybe making things a little bit more affordable, but it doesn't seem to be. So California's always been its own separate monster. It obviously has a lot to do with the fact, let's look how large the state is to start with. It's a big state. I think Texas is bigger, but if I'm not mistaken, I think California is the second biggest state. I think Montana's right up there. I may be wrong, so check me on that. Point out down below what an idiot I am if I was wrong on that. But I think it's the second largest state as far as square area goes. And obviously it travels very far north and south as opposed to Montana, which is east and west. Texas is kind of a big, triangular type deal that's kind of all in one area. But there's a huge amount of climate change between Eureka, California and San Diego, California. And of course, certainly as you move east into the, from the coast into the central part of the state, things change immensely there, which means you've got a completely different climate and multiple climates. And I don't remember what it is, but I know that there is something that's like, did you know? And you're kind of surprised at how many different climates there actually are in the state of California. I can't remember what it is, but I'm talking about temperate and what's the other different ones that they have? I can't even think of what the climates are because I'm not a scientist and I didn't have to take a lot of science classes. But do you know what I mean? There's that many, or I think there's the most of any state in California of the different types of climate, which also would include topography, scenery. I mean, you can be in the middle of California and there's nothing around you, believe it or not. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, there's deserts, there's mountains, there's skiing, there's obviously a huge coastline. So it's got a lot to offer travelers from an options, I guess, standpoint. In other words, if you like the mountains, you wouldn't think, well, I mean, there are people that say, I like the California mountains, I like the Sierra Nevada mountains. And so it works for them. There are people that say, I like, the desert, I like dry climate, I like warm weather, I like beachfront, I like big cities. So there's a bunch of reasons why California can oftentimes land on someone's choice of destination. Usually, and I would say this with, I said consistently over the years, California has also been one of the top paying destinations because the cost of living is high. And the trick for travelers was to try to figure out how to be here, and either stay here or get out here, and not break the bank by, saying, oh boy, I'm going to make X amount of dollars, but I'm also like, holy cow, look at how much money I'm going to be spending on my housing. And just to kind of throw the nugget out there, I was saying the last 4 or 5 years, food and costs of everything out here is noticeably higher than everything else. And I can speak from experience in that. We're not just talking gas. I'm talking about literally going to the grocery store, literally going out to dinner, grabbing a coffee, buying clothes. It's all more expensive noticeably over the last 4 or 5 years. It used to be like, okay, it's California, I'm going to pay a little more. But now it's like, oh my gosh. Going out to dinner with 4 people is it is not a cheap, let's just do it all the time kind of thing when you live out here. It's hard. And I've got a college student out there, and she knows, man, out here, that she knows what that's like. And I'm proud of how she's learning how to save money and be frugal, because she's going to need to if she wants to continue to live out here when college is over. So there's also, because, like I said, California, you said it was a place that you can make a lot of money, but there is a big economic swing in different locations of California too. So not every place in California is super duper expensive. Did I just use the word super duper? I think I did. And that was one word because in my mind I hyphenated it, just so you guys know. So in my world it was one word. There is a lot of places that the cost of living is lower, and a lot of places where also the pay rates are lower. So it isn't just anymore go to California and you can be in the middle of nowhere, even in some more rural or industrial cities in California, you can still make a fortune. Sometimes nowadays, as we'll get into as this episode progresses, it's not that lucrative in some areas of California. And it does have a lot to do with, I guess, supply and demand and what they feel they can get. And I think it has a lot to do with some local California-only travelers. We'll get into that here in a second. But what I'm getting at is not only is there a huge variety, if you will, of destination experiences, there's also a big disparagement on the pay rates for these different areas. And the rule of thumb always is, go back to supply and demand, the more sought after any destination in our country is, the less it's going to have to typically pay. So, I mean, it just is what it is, as they say. You can have a beautiful cold weather destination that's gorgeous. I'm trying to think of one. Reno, Nevada comes to mind. There are some nice places in cities like Duluth, Minnesota, up in, northern Michigan, upstate New York, that people do like to go to. If it's a nice town, it doesn't pay as much as some place that isn't a desirable location, even if it's in the same state or in the same climate situation during any time of year. There are just good destinations and bad destinations. And California has both of those, along with economic differences in what each destination is going to pay. So it really does make itself one of the more unique destinations out there. So one of the things I always like to talk about, and I think it's kind of bears mentioning here, is that there are a few states in the country, a handful of states I can think of that just come to mind, probably more than I'm thinking of, where people are very loyal and want to stay in that state. Usually they're from that state, or they get a taste of that state, they don't want to leave. Florida comes to mind. Texas is another one. People that are in Texas, that's where they want to be. Texas people that live in Texas are very proud of their state, and they like their state, and they don't typically like to go out of their state. I shouldn't say they don't typically. Many travelers like to travel within the state of Texas. Florida's another one like that. California absolutely falls into that category. I'm sure there's others. that again just kind of slipping my mind right now. But those three always come to mind where it's not unusual to have a California resident not be interested in anything but the state of California and destinations here. First of all, they've got that license. It's not compact state license. California still has not done that. So once you get a California license, and you first of all aren't instantly able to work in every other compact state, at least as of the recording of this episode. So unless you're going to go out and start getting licenses, it does limit California residents who haven't decided to go ahead and start getting a library full of licenses, so to speak. They're going to stick in California because that's the only one they need, it's the one they want, the only one they have to maintain. They don't, otherwise, again, it doesn't apply in a reciprocal fashion to any other state like many of the states that you guys are in. So unless you just know you want to work up in Washington or in Nevada or somewhere completely across the country, most California, or a lot of California residents, I keep being very absolute, and I don't mean to be, a lot of California residents have chosen just to say, I'll just stick with this because there's plenty of opportunity here. And there is. So it is unique that there's a lot of travelers that it's good for a lot of you guys who aren't interested in California because it does keep them here. But as travel evolved trained travelers, you should also know that when it comes to California assignments, oftentimes the competition level is even higher than other places because of all the things that you guys already know, supply and demand, pay rate, but also because the supply in this particular state is oftentimes higher based on the normal demand than many other states where people really are transient and go in and out of state at different times of the year. Florida and Texas come to mind where they don't have that constant hub of people that are always there, right? They've got their population that want to stay, but there's a ton of people that come in, a ton of people that leave and want to go work elsewhere once they've done those two assignments. Probably those two states has a lot to do with the fact that they don't typically pay nearly as much as California does. So if you are working in Texas and Florida, last time I checked, obviously the last few years aside, those are not what has typically been the most lucrative states that come to mind if you're going to take an assignment across the board. If something really paid well, more often than not, really veteran and experienced travelers say, why is that one paying well? Oh, because it's down here and it's tough and wherever it is. But there was always reasons behind that. Along that line, there is also a ton of California travel agencies. And I'm not talking about, two out of the big three. I'm talking about just mom and pop and lifestyle type companies that happen to be out here. And they've done a good job of, over the years, getting to know and getting their feet in the door of some of the major systems I'll talk about here in a minute out here in California. So they've got plenty of jobs. And what's great about, I guess, for a lot of those facilities, that they're getting their needs met by a few big national companies, some of everybody else, and a lot of local companies that seem to be able to deliver for them, local California travelers. So again, just something to keep in mind as you are looking for an assignment in California. You may find that a local California company, even though it might be a smaller one, may be a good option to throw your hat into the ring with, because they may have some things that you don't have with some of the big companies or in some agencies that are more nationally recognized. And they might also have some better pay rates because they might not have to have the margins that a big, large California type based company might have. So I'm saying, just advice from me, look into some multiple different options. If you're looking at California, I would not just go with a big company. I wouldn't just go with a local California company. I wouldn't just go with a medium-sized company that's located elsewhere in the country. I would kind of play around a little bit and see who's got what. And I think you will find one of the biggest things you'll see is there are some companies, like I just said, that have a ton of positions that the average, mom and pop company nationally may not have here in California. Because if it's being met, their fulfillment at that hospital is being met, then they have no interest in going out and getting another company to play in the same field. Which goes back to some of you that are asking me a lot about, starting your own agency. It's going to be tough. It will be tough for you to break through the state of California without any reputation, without anyone knowing who you are, unless you have some kind of connection or know somebody who knows somebody or know somebody directly. You're going to have to sharpen your teeth in certain areas and show that you can deliver for California before you jump right and say, I'm going to do it. So it's just something to kind of think about across the board for everybody. All right, in my opinion, one of the downfalls to California, and there are many, by the way, there are many downfalls, but one of them is just the insane and complicated and high tax laws that this state has. It's you don't have to look too far to get some kind of a story on whether we're talking, real estate tax and or sales tax to see that California's got some of the highest in the country, which means as you are working in California, your gross to net on your paycheck is going to be altered more substantially here than I believe any place else in the country. If you live here, it doesn't matter, right? You're a California resident, it doesn't matter where you're going, you're just making more money probably, which means you're going to pay more taxes because you get higher income. So keep that in mind. Becoming a traveler that doesn't make crazy money in California might actually mean you net less money, or at least it may not be worth the risk. So something for California residents to think about if you're going to decide to be a traveler. Really look at it and say, what would this mean to me tax-wise if I have it? Because California's got some wacky tax laws. Obviously, it brings up the whole point of the tax advantage and when you have to pay that back. And as most people know, you really aren't supposed to be in California for a year. I believe it's still a year. I could be wrong on that. Certainly let me know down at the bottom of this thing. But most people do not take a year's 4 consecutive. They'll do 3 in California because as you're paying that in the state of California's gotten smart. And one of the things I actually totally see this. I don't know why more states don't do this. They're saying, hey, this revenue is generated in our state. Just because you don't live here doesn't mean you should be giving it back and applying it to your home state. We want you to apply it to our taxes, and we want you to file taxes in the state of California. And they have put a rule in place that shows if you've basically lived here and been generating revenue for a certain amount of time, and I think it's at a year, then you have to basically forfeit those taxes to the state of California, which means you cannot apply those at a lower rate to your home state or your tax home. And the reason why it's an issue is because there's pretty much a 100% chance that the taxes you paid in California are higher than the taxes you'd be paying in your home state. So they've gotten smart and want that. I think there's a few other states that are looking at it. I could be wrong. It could be down to 6 months now, but I still think that's the general rule of thumb. And it's one of the few states that has actually done this, that said, hey, hold on. Like I said, I've heard rumblings and people have told me that there's some other states. I haven't really done the research to find out if that's the case. I need to know that answer. So again, comment to some other people and help out some other travelers by letting us know if there's another state that has said you're going to surrender those taxes. But it's not. There's a point where you have to leave California, again, if you're not a resident, because it does make sense that money you're going to forfeit is greater than the value of taking, in this case, a 4th assignment, if I'm right on those numbers. So you have to really look at that sort of thing. You have to really be smart as a traveler and don't just knee-jerk reaction because if it's a place you want to go or money you want to make. You've got to look at everything when it comes to an assignment. And that's one of those weird ones you may not think about. All right, so I want to kind of give you guys a quick history. Like I said, when I first got in this industry, California, well, it had a lot of strikes, and we talked about strikes and that sort of thing. I did work them. I never worked one out in California, to be honest with you. All my strikes were in New York that I worked. I never came out here for one because it wasn't as prevalent during my brief period of time with that company. However, that was part of the popularity of the state. There was a period of time in the early 2000s when the state of California, and I think Bakersfield comes to mind, some other destinations, were really at the Bay Area, were really struggling with their unions and with their unions and the negotiation of new contracts with healthcare providers, primarily nurses, I believe, but could have been across the board during that period of time. So it was creating a constant state of shortness of supply in different areas of the state, which then would lead that people were getting frustrated, and it just had a natural progression of having more and more needs and less fulfillment across the board, which means per diem wasn't working, permanent staff wasn't working, and so more and more facilities were becoming reliant upon using travelers out in this state to fulfill and to staff their hospitals. It certainly wasn't a good financial thing for a lot of these hospitals. They were used to pulling in a lot of money, charging a lot of money. They get paid a lot of money, but more and more of it was going to supplemental staff and not to permanent staff, which we all know, especially with traveling, is the most expensive way to staff a facility. Part of the biggest problem, as many of you guys know, is that California has a daily overtime. And there's obviously a lot of different, not a lot of different, but I've heard different stories as to where that originated, but from what I understand, it was to keep people from taking advantage of people that want to come out and pick crops, that they would work them 12, 15 hours and then not work them for the rest of the week, and that was unfair. So they wanted to make it so that people really were trying to get 8-hour days, and if it was more than 8 hours, it was really going to cost you, which is what the overtime law still is here in California. Anything over 8 hours daily, you are legally supposed to be paid time and a half of your total compensation, not just the taxable portion. But if you agree to it, it's different. So anyway, this sounds great, and it was incredibly lucrative for travelers. Again, I'm going back to the early to mid 2000s when overtime and holiday was paid at 1.5 of the bill rate. And I've shared with you guys many times that that's not the case anymore. It's $8 more, it's $5 more, it's $10 more, and maybe it's 1.25 of the bill rate. But it isn't. It's only to help you cover payroll and payroll taxes at an increased rate. It's not meant to double housing or double, any taxes or, I'm sorry, not taxes, travel reimbursements or insurance. That's all covered already, so households got smart. So this was really, really hurting facilities. Sorry for all the noise. Helicopter Central here today. It was really, really hurting the facilities financially when they would work with travelers, because they all, of course, many of them, especially in certain modalities of a hospital, were working on 12-hour shifts. So listen, there's a lot of hospitals that went out of business in this state back in the 2000s. My biggest hospital, I won't mention the name of it, I don't know why, it doesn't really matter, but one of my biggest hospitals up in San Jose was one of them that was a huge, victim of this, how difficult it was during that period of time to staff a hospital and not have it eventually affect the bottom line, which I want people to hear this, because there are so many travelers out there who have an ill-conceived idea of what a hospital can afford with labor. Because let's be honest, we all know hospitals make a ton of money. We all know that in most cases, healthcare providers are underpaid. I believe that. You may or may not believe it, but I believe that they are. So the traveler instinct and what you see on social media is that they ought to be paying us more and we could do this. And I see this a lot now. And it makes me kind of roll my eyes, and I get a little frustrated when I read comments like, we should be making $4,000 to $5,000 a week from here on out. Well, first of all, if that was the case, do you know how many people would flood the healthcare market and you guys would be early retired in about 10 years? Because if people were able to make $500,000 a year being a healthcare provider, the market itself would change drastically and it would be flooded with people. We know this. The real reason I'm saying this is that hospitals actually can't afford that kind of revenue. It may seem weird because you're like, well, what are they putting their money on? But they've got proven fact that hospitals are going out of business for just an increase in traveler costs during the 2000s and into 2000, really early 2000s. So it gets me a little bit, I don't know, I love defending, and most of you guys that listen to this get it, but when you see some of these rogue comments out there saying we should make that, it makes you just go, come on, stop saying things like that, because you're not helping your fellow traveler, you're not helping the industry, because it's unrealistic, and it will not happen. There will not be rates at $4,000 a week gross weekly forever going forward. It will not work in this country, it will not function, and you would see a collapse of healthcare. So let's stop pretending that a hospital system is going to pay $4,000 to $5,000 a week for supplemental staff. They would pay half that and attract permanent staff, and you guys wouldn't have travel anymore, because there would be no need for travelers to be that many healthcare providers in the marketplace in 12 to 15 years. It would be over that fast. We'd fix our healthcare issue and we'd fix our shortages of some of those, but it wouldn't have anything to do with travel anymore, because this industry would go south and be done real fast. There'd only be a handful of companies that would do this anymore. I feel like I'm getting angry when it just does drive me nuts. I love good comments, but comments from travelers, comments from agencies, comments from vendors, oftentimes on social media especially, just make me just go, come on. I want you guys to understand that I still believe wholeheartedly the next decade is going to be incredibly lucrative for travelers, more so based upon percentages of dollars spent, in my opinion, than it has ever had been, and it will continue. You guys will make more money, but there is not enough room for everybody that's out there right now, which means, and it's happening right now, travelers are getting out of travel, or they're not even going after taking jobs. I never really kind of finished my thought early on when I was talking about my conversation, but that's what everyone was basically saying, was that the volume of people that are interested in jobs paying $2,500 a week is so much less than it was in 2019. That would have been a great job, right? We're seeing ER jobs and jobs that are even paying less than that, and people are fulfilling them. But there are new travelers that are going, this is insulting. I'm not going to do that, and I can't. I'm not going to work for that level. Well, then then you don't have to. You have options to go back to perm. You look at what that does for you. You look at the taxes you're going to pay on your stuff. But you got benefits. You got seniority. Again, everyone is different. But to think that we're going to maintain this high level isn't going to be the case. And what we're all seeing right now, and like I said, and I guess to complete my thought was, and I'm so sorry about that beeping, if that's coming through this microphone really bad, there's nothing I can do about that unless I just don't record an episode this week. They're taking down everything from the U.S. Open, so it's literally right outside my door. The U.S. Open is surfing, and there's just no time unless I want to record this at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I love you guys, but I'm not recording this at 3 o'clock in the morning. The final thought I was going to say is that I believe many of us have a huge number of our participants of travel healthcare providers that are what I'm considering the new traveler. And I think many of them are holding off and saying, ooh. So in my opinion, what my job is right now is to attract the mainstay traveler. Not necessarily, it doesn't matter if they're new or old, but the ones that have decided I'm in this for the long haul and I'm willing to go up and down in the pay ratio. I love the lifestyle. This is what I want to do. So my particular goal right now is to focus on those people and attract those people to my agency, and not necessarily going after, somebody who's a new traveler who may not like the current pay trends. And that's what we all kind of talked about yesterday. It was kind of an interesting conversation. And we were all on the exact same page. So either we're all really, dumb the same way, or all smart the same way. We'll figure out how it goes over time. So that overtime, I mentioned the time and a half after 8 hours really did throw a monkey wrench into a lot of the staffing. So much so that when hospitals were going out of business and they were losing money, many of them came up with their own laws and rules and worked them through the state to make sure they were compliant. But there are laws and rules now where they can post a job with us and they can say very clearly that this job does not pay. We will not let you bill us as an agency for anything either under 40 hours weekly, or some of them I even see after 48, which means we now as agencies have to calculate what does this look like to pay someone regular hours and time and a half on a bill rate that we don't get more of or an increase in after 8 hours daily. So we're just doing the math, guys. We're just taking the full, what's called a blended rate then, that we're going to be paying. We're going to be able to bill for the first hour and bill for the 9th hour. And we're saying, what does that equal for 8 hours and 4 hours? And how do we now show a traveler, here's your rate and here's time and a half? Because at the end of the formula, it's all the same money for a 12-hour shift, because we're still going to keep, and those companies are going to keep their 30+% margins on those for hours 1 and hours 9 up to 12. So it helps the facility to not have to throw out a rate and then multiply that times, add $10 or $8 more to that for anything over 8. So they've figured out ways to try to do it. Now, what can happen is the rate can be so low that no one can fulfill it. I mean, I've had people recently say, man, some of the places in California are paying really, really low, and they're not wrong. Or they're paying decently, what seems decent, but when you start looking at the cost of living, and I'm thinking mostly Bay Area or Orange County, it's like it doesn't make sense. The weekly gross compared to what the weekly cost of living here is in complete disparagement with each other. It's not going to work, and it's not for me. And in that case, what I will tell you is that they're going to still keep those rates there as long as they can. If they're finding local contracts like we talked about a few weeks ago, they're not going to care. They'll take those folks over bringing in a traveler that needs to make $10, $15 more an hour, or be able to have a bill rate that's $10 or $15 more an hour in order to satisfy and get that fulfillment of that need. So I always tell travelers, try not to shoot the messenger too much. Now, if you've got the same hospital and two totally different pay rates, shoot the low-paying messenger for sure. But if it's, hey, here's what the hospital is paying, and you see a bunch of agencies all in a relatively similar pay rate, it tells you that, and by the way, it's low and you don't approve of it. Don't go after them all and say all these agencies are trying to rip you off. It's the hospital. They have thrown out a bill rate that, for whatever reason, historically, they feel is the right bill rate to be able to attract the travel that they need, which either means they don't know what they're doing, or it means historically they've been able to fulfill for this level, and it's not for any of us, you guys or an agency, to judge whether or not that's the right or wrong bill rate. If they've gotten it, whatever way they're getting it, then then as they say, more power to you. That means that you found it. You've got your travelers as they're taking it. It just might not be for you, and an agency may not be able to fulfill at that same level. But we're going to try, and you're going to look at it, see if it makes sense for you, right? So it created some different rules, and obviously a lot of things it also created in California was it had this overtime rate I'm talking about, and the problems and the cost associated with it for California facilities. Was it also created a lot of them to move into 8-hour shifts. So you guys will notice that I'm thinking of nursing primarily that oftentimes has 12-hour shifts, or a surge tech that's doing a 12-hour shift, or a sterile processing tech, or one of those areas that normally would have 12s. Some hospitals are strictly all 8s out here in California because they've said, well, if you're going to make that crazy law, then we have no choice but to staff our permanent and our supplemental staff the same way, which means the over 8 doesn't apply. If you do work 9 hours, you're going to say, okay, well, you're probably going to work 41, so what does it matter if we're paying you on this time, or the first day of the week or the last day of the week? It's still going to be more. So they'll do that all day long. But there, as you guys will notice, a lot of hospitals in the state and a lot of different facilities that have moved, and maybe it's been so long you don't even recognize it anymore, but that are on 8-hour shifts across the board. So that's why, because it has nothing to do with them trying to be difficult or wanting people to be there 5 days a week instead of 3. It just has to do with the payroll costs and the overtime rule, and them saying, well, we got to figure out how to get around this, because it wasn't really meant to hurt hospitals. It really wasn't. It just so happens that the law is the law, and you have to pay overtime after 8 hours daily out here. So they had to figure a workaround, and one of the best ways to do it is say, we won't have anybody work over 8 hours daily, and that's exactly what they've done. So I want you guys to kind of see and hear that there are deals that I see, and I can speak from experience, that come from the state of California, offers and job orders I see that are ridiculously low, to the point where I'm like, oh gosh, man, I don't really want that, showing up anywhere where it's associated with my company's name, because it looks like it's a reflection on us. And I've learned over time that it's not. Most people are going to ignore those. It is not. Those jobs seem to be for the absolute local traveler. In any state, you see something that's ridiculously low. So if you're seeing that consistently from your company or from the companies that you're working with, it just means that right now the demand is enough that they can handle it with something with a lower bill rate, which means a lower pay rate, and they're getting all the supply that they need for their fulfillment at that level. So it does move, and I think there are times of the year, and I think there are years that are periods of time where California has less supply and more supply. It seems like right now they've got quite a bit, and they do have a lot of needs out here. That's for sure. It's one of the states that seems to be growing consistently every time I look at the total number of jobs my particular company has, and I look at this a lot to say which states are needing needs and aren't fulfilling it, and why. Is it compact? Is it non-compact? Is there something going on with the health of that state? And California is one that right now seems to have a lot of needs, but the rates don't seem to necessarily be going through the roof. They're just kind of there. And while the needs are increasing, I would expect if they don't get fulfillment, that would mean that the rates are going to increase. Right now, I'm not seeing that, which tells me that either it's coming or they're going to continue to get the fulfillment, and the people that want to take lucrative, high-paying California assignments are going to have to wait until there are lucrative, high-paying California assignments. And then that will come, and it will come and go so far. So housing is something I wanted to kind of address, and I wrote it down here, so I was kind of stumbling there for a minute, because I think more than any other state, this particular state, you have to absolutely categorically make sure you're doing your research on the cost of living. And it's not just housing. You should be, there are sites where you can check grocery store prices, gas prices, not only housing prices, but, meals out. What's the average meal out? You can find almost anything you would want on the internet anymore. And you certainly should be able to say, yes, I got this great lucrative assignment. Maybe I found great housing, but everything else is through the roof, and you're doing a home health, and you're going to be putting gas in, or your apartment is a decent ways away, so you're going to be sitting in California traffic maybe, and you're going to be idling, but you're going to be sitting there, and it's going to suck up your gas. Every part of the cost of living in this state, in my opinion, needs to be truly looked at and investigated and researched before you are asking a company to put you in front of a position. I just think you need to do that for yourself, because you may take this assignment and go, oh my gosh, I can't afford to make ends meet, or this is not making sense because of the money I'm keeping in my pocket when this whole thing's over. So just keep that in mind. So another thing I just want to mention this in this episode, and I just want to just throw it out there. I don't really know what my point of this is, but California is one of those states that has a number of very specific hospital systems that reside or are housed or are headquartered out here in California, which means, and I'm not going to mention them all, I'm not going to give them plugs, but you guys know what I'm talking about. There are certain systems that are unique just to California. You can't even find a hospital outside the state. And those are where you're going to have those local agencies I'm talking about, or a big national company might have a little bit of a stranglehold on some of those positions. Like I say, it can be good. It can also be a bad thing, depending upon your own situation. If you've got a lot of experience and you're highly sought after in your field, if you're not, it's just something that I want you to keep in mind, that there are entire systems that are, like I said, headquartered or specific or mostly specific to the state of California, which means they have a lot of control. So it's something to think about. Let's say you take a position and you're in one of these systems, you kind of want to make sure you kick some you-know-what on this assignment, because you could be eliminating a huge chunk of hospitals if you walk off that assignment and leave it in bad terms. That vendor, that system may mark you, and we're going to do some episodes about being blackballed, walking off an assignment, terminating your own assignment, canceling before an assignment. And they're necessary to have. I don't want to sound like I'm beating up travelers, but I do think it's important, if we're going to do a series on what to know, that's one of them. And that's going to be a tough one because it's going to feel like I'm doing this, but those are true. And here's one of those examples that if you walk into a tough assignment in one of these systems out here in California and you have a bad manager, a bad unit, bad whatever, you're being bullied like I talked about last week, you may want to think 2 or 3 times before you decide to leave that assignment or to raise fuss about it. And I'm not trying to tell you to take anything, but I'm telling you to be smart and realize that if you are a California-only person, if you really like it out here, and this is one of your areas that you want to be at a lot or you want to be at all the time, you kind of sometimes have to keep it all into perspective. What does this mean for my career and my future? Listen, everybody on the planet has to bite their tongue every once in a while on some things. We all do, and it's hard, and it's one of those things. I'm not asking you to. I'm just telling you, think about it before you potentially burn a permanent bridge with a big job supplier when you're dealing with the state of California. So there you go. I want to spend a little bit of time kind of talking about where we were, and I want to get through this whole history so I can start talking about how to start a company and what it's like and just the craziness that goes on behind the scenes of an agency, which I think is, once we get to that kind of discussion, I think that you guys are going to find it pretty fascinating. I think that's where we're going to start to bridge some of the gap between travelers and agencies and say, we're all kind of human. We're all in this really wacky world, and that's the way I'll explain it. But I want to get through this so you guys kind of know a little bit about me, and that way it might make more sense when you hear some of the decisions that I've made, some of the changes and wiggles and wags that we've gone through with my current company and just how it all worked out. So where I left it last time was that I was working for this big company, and they just really didn't understand, I think, the whole concept. But it was such a great experience that I started kicking around the idea of starting my own company. And I was like, man, that seems, I don't know if I was just young and dumb or felt like I was invulnerable. I felt like I could just do it. But it's interesting because I started talking to my wife about the same time she was pregnant with my son. maybe I have this knack for asking her really weird things when her hormones are all going through the roof. But I did. I said, listen, I think I want to figure out how to start my own company and have us, it just doesn't make sense. I think I've learned this. What do we need to do now to get this going? And so, bless her heart, she gave me her full blessings on that, and I went for it and found a junior partner and basically started a company and said, we're going to walk in the door just like I did with MedLogix. I said it was the same thing with this company. Healthcare Staffing Network. I said, we are just going to start a new company. And we did. I grabbed one of my gals that was from the other company, came over with me, and she was my top recruiter at the time, and really trusted her. And so she came over, and the two of us, with my junior partner, who really was just, more the finance guy, basically we started this company from scratch. And it was honestly one of the most fun, rewarding things I've ever done in my life. It was scary, but I was young enough to. I mean, I was in my 30s. I was 30, I guess, early 30s, and I was young enough that I did feel like I was a little bit invulnerable. But I just, I figured if I swung and missed, I could go back and go work for somebody else. But it was so challenging and so much fun. The one thing that I will tell anybody who's thinking about starting an agency is when you are in that nubile stage, in the beginning stages, everything you do that's a success, I don't care if it's a contract directly with a hospital or with a vendor or with a whole system, to getting a traveler who was interested and wanted to work with you, all those things were, every second was exciting. It's like, yeah, we got somebody and we're going to kick some butt for him or her, or we got this contract and we're going to really do well by it. I remember those days very specifically because we worked so hard to get something kind of going, and it felt like very quickly things started to fall into place. And here's where I will tell you where the California thing really did come into play to kind of tie it into today's episode, because one of the first ones I got was that big hospital up in San Jose. No, it wasn't one of the first, but it was early on. And it was enough that went, there's a market here. And it was especially, by the way, it happened to be ER and ICU that I was primarily working with. I got so close with the ICU manager that she would actually call me before she'd call anybody else, or shoot me an email of what her needs were, because I was always able to fulfill for her. And so she started relying upon my company to be able to do that. But it was, again, writing a business plan. And for those of you that haven't thought about this, you need to write a business plan. I don't care if you don't ever think you're going to, if you're independently wealthy, or you have all the money in the world, or you think you're going to need to go out and get investors, or you think you're going to have to go out and get a line of credit from a bank. Writing a business plan from the very beginning is one of the most important things you should do. And that's exactly what I did. I sat down and literally wrote the book on a travel healthcare agency from A to Z. Whether it was right or wrong, I wrote it. And we sat down there and we looked at it and went for it. And it was, like I said, as things were moving in good directions pretty quickly on, it was one of the best times of my life, because it was so satisfying knowing that what I wanted to do and how I wanted to take care of the traveler was what was going to happen. There wasn't anybody from corporate or anybody who was above me who was going to come down and say, this is what we need to do. Yes, I had employees, and we did add employees as we went. I remember for a while that felt like it was the good old boys club, because it just was, it seemed like the gal that was with me, she didn't last very long, because it was hard. It was hard to make a living if you were just recruiting for a brand new company. But I ended up having like what I call it was like a fraternity house, I swear. It was a bunch of young guys and me, and I wasn't that young by that time. And for whatever reason, we had fun and we just knocked it out of the park. I just felt like we could just do it. And if we treated it kind of like, a bullpen and really had some of those Glengarry, Glen Ross moments, that we could go out and we could land and secure a lot of stuff. And by the way, that's what we did. We were one of the first providers for what is now a major vendor out there. And I became pretty good friends with at least two of the three guys that were running this vendor management group. And they used to call me all the time to ask my opinion on what would be good bill rates for, something unusual like a nurse anesthetist or a nuclear med tech, or things that they hadn't seen, or how do we do this? And I remember very closely working with them, and we became one of the companies that really kind of put them on the map. I mean, we were all so young, but it wasn't too far off in 2004 when I think this company was becoming created, that or I guess 2003, 2004, that it was a time where the vendor management model was becoming something of an issue. So I'll talk more about it next week, but mostly what I wanted to get across was, this is where I finally said, like many of you have, or maybe you've thought about, that I feel like I want to start my own thing and be able to have an agency that was designed by me, that, like anything else, when you're designing a company, you've got to figure out what you're going to focus on, what's going to be your strategy to be able to attract, and how's that going to work, and how do the numbers work, and how do you make money without giving it all away to everybody, and how do you figure out how to grow a company. And none of this, by the way, had I ever done before. But in typical fashion, I decided just to go for it. Headstrong, as went in and started doing it. And like I said, it was one of the best times of my life, because like I said, I think it was just that mental phase. For those of you who remember having young kids, you kind of walking through life with the fog anyway. So it gave me something to really focus and concentrate on, and it was such hard work. But I also would say, like I did I think it was last week, I told you guys that I don't know if I could do that right now without having the reputation that I have in the industry and be able to call people and having people know who I am and getting contracts and getting travelers is it's much different now. If I was me then, now, I don't know if I'd be able to do it like I did back then. I think we just found the right time frame when there wasn't that many agencies out there, and it was kind of like, well, we'd love to have you participate with our needs. And yes, we'd love to, as a nurse, I'd love to, or a traveler, I'd love to work with you guys and see what you guys are going to offer. So it was kind of easy going, so to speak, as opposed to what I think is now. I really can't answer questions for people that are interested in starting an agency right now about what's it like and how hard it is. But I think it's harder than it's ever been. I think the last couple of years has made it even harder with how many agencies have come in and how oftentimes they will get a contract with a vendor and then literally do nothing with it and sit on it. And I think vendors are tired of that. Hospital systems are tired of that. And they never know who's going to be able to produce before they offer them the deal. And they don't want to work with 100 companies. They want to work with 30, 40 different agencies that they feel are going to get their fulfillment met. So I do believe for those of you that are aspiring to have your agency, this will be probably the biggest challenge for you, is how to secure the contracts. But I'll tell you, back in the day, when I started this company out, it was fun, and what I found was as you got one of them, the rest of them would start to line up, because just saying, you start getting references. Oh yeah, I've got this big system, here you go. Next thing you know, boom, 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 it was starting to come into play, and it was a really cool time in healthcare travel during those days, because it was kind of it wasn't unheard of yet, but it was just the growth period in our industry, and to be able to be a part of that was so much fun, to see the industry change from something that nobody had heard of to then having people actually be talking about it in nursing school and in technical school all over the country. That this is, by the way, traveling is an option. Here's what you can look for and expect. So, guys, I went a little long today. I appreciate it. I want to talk about California. I hope I got you excited to come out here. There is great opportunity here, but I do believe that of all the different destinations, this is one of a handful that you really, really, really got to research so that you know what you're walking into. Because if you're not from here, you got to educate yourself on what this assignment's going to be all about and kind of what the market is like. So, as always, guys, I appreciate you. I will catch you next time on Travel Evolved.